You're watching The Last Climb. Today, I'll cover the Annapurna expedition where 4 young friends walked straight into their doom on the deadliest mountain on Earth. Most of them had the skill and experience to conquer the mountain, but during the climb, something caused their friendship to come apart. And what that unexpectedly did to the 4 of them is one of the saddest and most devastating things I have ever had to tell. It was April 24th, 2022, and high on the north side of Annapurna, strung out across the one stretch of mountain every climber there fears most, 4 young people who had stopped trusting one another were moving far too slowly through a place that punishes slowness with death. Annapurna is the 10th highest mountain in the world. 26,545 feet of ice and broken rock standing in the middle of Nepal, and for decades it has carried a title none of the others want. It is the deadliest of all the great peaks, the one that has killed a larger share of the people who climbed it than any other, and the reason is not the altitude, it is the mountain itself. The slopes load with snow and let go without warning, whole faces of it sliding away in seconds, and the standard route runs straight up underneath all of it. Climbers who have stood on top of Everest will tell you Annapurna is a different kind of fear, the kind that never lets you rest, because the danger here is not something you push through with strong lungs. It is something hanging over your head the entire climb, waiting, and there is no clever way around it. That is the mountain 4 friends from Colorado picked for the trip that was supposed to bring them closer together. Weeks before they flew out, the trip already had its own page online, run mostly by Nico, the one who turned everything the 4 of them did into something worth watching. There was the announcement, all 4 crowded into a frame with their gear spread out behind them, talking over each other about the boldest thing any of them had ever attempted. He wrote about the years the group had spent climbing together and the peaks they had ticked off as a unit, and introduced all 4 by role. The steady one, the strong one, the careful one, the funny one, promising everyone they would post from every camp on the mountain. He signed off calling it the climb that would define their 20s. 4 best friends against one of the hardest mountains in the world, and said the only thing that could ever stop them was the weather. It's wild how often these climbs get sold as the thing that makes a friendship unbreakable, when an 8,000er does the opposite. It finds every weak seam in a group and pulls until something tears. There were 4 of them, 2 couples, and on paper they were a strong little team. Cyrone Yount was 26, and the closest thing the group had to a leader, a carpenter who had been climbing hard since his teens, and had by far the most real mountain time of anyone there. He was the one who checked the knots twice, and read the weather and worried, and the others let him carry that weight because he was good at it. His girlfriend was Ananya Vesna, 25, lean and quietly tough, a nurse who had climbed for years and missed nothing. Cyrone and Ananya had real altitude behind them, the top of Denali and a couple of big peaks down in the Andes, the kind of climbs that teach you what thin air does to a body. The younger couple had less. Nico Ferreira, 22, was all energy and no patience, gifted on rock but green above the snowline, the kind who mistook being bold for being ready, and his girlfriend Fern Quill was 18, sweet and game, and completely out of her depth, on a mountain far more serious than anything she had ever touched. They had cut their teeth together all over the American West. Smaller peaks where a bad day meant a long cold night and a story to laugh about later, and somewhere in all that fun they had quietly decided they were ready for anything. When they went looking for a way onto Annapurna, the outfit that said yes was a small budget operation, the kind that asks a climber far fewer questions than a careful one should. Annapurna is not anything. Annapurna is the thing all those smaller mountains were supposed to be warning them about. The posts kept coming as they trekked in, and for a while they were exactly what everyone wanted to see. 4 young people laughing on a trail that climbed into thinner and thinner air, arms around each other at every tea house, captions about how lucky they were to be doing this with their favorite people on Earth. But if you watched closely, something was already shifting underneath. The group shots thinned out. More and more of the frames were just Nico out front on his own, and his captions slowly stopped being about the 4 of them and started being about the climb, the schedule, the summit. The comments rolled in calling them goals, the perfect crew living the dream, and not one of those strangers could see the small distances opening up between them with every day they walked deeper into the mountains. At base camp, they met the men who would actually be responsible for keeping them alive. A small Sherpa team, led by a Sirdar named Tendi, with a younger climbing Sherpa named Mingmar alongside him. It was a lean crew for 4 clients, the kind of corner a budget outfit cuts. 2 strong men where a careful expedition would have sent more. Tendi was in his late 40s and had been on these mountains since he was a boy, with several 8,000ers behind him, and, just as important, a handful he had turned back from before the top and walked away from alive. He had been on Annapurna before. He knew exactly which part of it did the killing. Mingmar was younger and strong and steady, the kind who carried more than his share and never mentioned it. The 2 of them watched the 4 friends settle into base camp and watched how they spoke to each other, and within a few days Tendi had quietly seen the thing that worried him most, which was not the 18-year-old's inexperience or the young couple's nerves, but the way the group's easy closeness had started to curdle into something tense and unspoken. A group only climbs as well as it trusts itself, and what I see when I look back at this is 4 friends slowly stopping trusting each other on the one mountain where that exact thing gets people killed. The route up Annapurna runs from base camp at around 13,700 feet through a Camp 1 and a Camp 2 and on toward the higher camps, and somewhere in the middle of it lies the stretch that has earned the mountain its reputation. Between Camp 2, at about 18,700 feet, and Camp 3, above 21,000, the way forward funnels into a single narrow corridor, a steep gut of snow and ice with a wall of hanging seracs leaning out over the top of it, blocks of ice the size of houses that have broken loose and come down that exact chute more times than anyone can count. There is no other line. Every climber who goes up Annapurna goes up through there, directly underneath all of it, and the only protection anyone has is speed and timing. You cross it in the black cold of the early morning when the ice is locked hard and least likely to move, and you cross it fast as a tight group, and you do not stop, and you pray the mountain stays still for the few minutes it takes. It is the kind of place where good climbers have simply vanished, swept away with no warning and nothing left to find. Tendi had lost people he knew in that corridor. He talked about it more than any other part of the climb, and the 4 of them listened the way you listen to a story you are certain is about somebody else. Cyrone kept his own notes through the rotations, not for anyone else, just a few lines on his phone at the end of each day the way he always had. Early on they were about the climbing, the loads, how the team moved, but the entries started to change. He wrote that Nico was pushing too hard and too fast, peeling off ahead and leaving Fern behind to keep up on her own, and that it was starting to scare him, and that trying to talk to Nico about it had not gone well. He wrote, in fewer and fewer words each night, about a tension in the group he did not know how to fix, about Ananya going quiet, about Fern looking more frightened every rotation, and nobody but him seeming to notice. Nowhere in those notes did he write the obvious thing, that the smart move was to turn the whole trip around and go home as friends, because that was not a thing any of them was willing to say out loud. The acclimatization rotations were where it truly came apart. Climbing a peak like this means going up and back down several times before any real attempt, sleeping a little higher each round, and on every one of those trips the cracks in the group showed a little more. Nico climbed like he had something to prove, fast and reckless, and he started treating Cyrone's caution as cowardice, needling him about it in front of the others. Cyrone pushed back, and the 2 of them, closed for years, began to circle each other with a low, constant friction that poisoned every decision. Ananya retreated into herself and stopped weighing in at all, which left no one steadying the group. And Fern, the youngest and least experienced by far, was quietly drowning, falling behind on the hard sections while her boyfriend raced ahead, and the couple who should have looked out for her were too busy not speaking to notice. Tendi saw all of it. He tried, in his careful way, to slow them down and get them moving as one again, and 4 young people who no longer fully trusted each other heard the hired help offering an opinion and kept right on unraveling. Fern was the only one of the 4 who wrote to someone outside the group, short messages to a friend back home whenever the satellite device could find a signal. At first they were giddy, all exclamation points, the views and the altitude and how proud she was just to be there, but they shrank as the rotations went on. She wrote that Nico kept getting ahead of her and that she did not want to slow everyone down, so she was not telling anyone how hard it really was. She wrote that Cyrone and Nico were fighting and that the tents were quiet, in a bad way now. In the last one she ever sent from base camp, she wrote that she was a little scared, honestly, but that the summit was close and everyone said the hard part was almost over and that she would call the second she was back down. She did not know writing it, how much that one small honest line set her apart from the 3 climbers who would not say it. Any one of them could have ended it with a single honest sentence in a tent. Somebody admitting that the group was coming apart and it was not safe anymore. I kept waiting for one of them to say it. Nico's posts through the rotations stayed bright and triumphant, and that was its own kind of lie. He filmed the 4 of them looking strong on the fixed lines, set it to music, and wrote about teamwork and trust and chasing something hard with the people you love. None of the friction reached the page, none of the silences, none of the moment a rotation ended with 2 of them not speaking and the youngest one crying in her tent. He posted a clip of Mingmar fixing a hard section of rope, sped up and captioned as a peek at the amazing team supporting their dream, and never thought to mention that the amazing team had just spent the day quietly holding a fracturing group together on dangerous ground. The story he sold got warmer and closer every rotation, exactly as the real one got colder and lonelier. All season, the upper mountain kept loading with new snow between the clear spells, and the Sherpas watched those slopes the way you watch a thing you do not trust. One night low on the mountain, the whole camp woke to the long rolling boom of a slide somewhere out in the dark, and in the morning Tendi and Mingmar studied the corridor above Camp 2 for a long time and said very little. Tendi had stood in that chute on calm mornings and felt the mountain shift under his boots, and he knew it gave no real warning. No matter what the sky looked like or how good a group felt, he had begun, by now, to do a thing he did with clients he truly worried about, working out in his head who he could reach if it came apart up there, and who he could not. He did not like the answer, because a scattered group gives a guide no good answers at all. There is a note in Cyrone's phone from the evening before they left for the top, and it is different from all the others. He wrote that Tendi had pulled him aside and told him plainly the group was not climbing as a team anymore, that in the corridor above Camp 2 that was the most dangerous thing there was, and that he thought they should wait, regroup, or go down. Cyrone wrote it all down, and then beside it he wrote that Nico would never agree to wait, that the window was right now, and that he did not have it in him to be the one who ended the trip everyone had given a year to. He closed it saying they would go in the morning and just be careful. It was the last thing he ever wrote. He was told in plain words that the team was broken and that they should wait, and I cannot get past it. The most experienced one of them wrote that down and still chose the argument he feared over the mountain that could kill him. When the weather window came, it was a decent one, and on a healthy team, it might have been enough. But Tendi did not like sending this particular group up high, not because of the sky, but because of the people, and he said so. He saw 4 climbers who had stopped moving as one, and he knew that the corridor above Camp 2 does not forgive a group that cannot hold together. He warned them as plainly as a guide can warn paying climbers who have already made up their minds. But the season was short, the window was open, and Nico had decided they were going. And once he decided, the fragile thing that was left of the group simply followed the loudest voice instead of the wisest one. When the window opened, Nico posted that this was it. He walked everyone through the plan one more time. The push-up through the camps, the careful early starts, the summit within a few days, then down and safe and home with the story of their lives. He wrote that after a year of training and dreaming, the 4 of them were finally about to stand on top of one of the most feared mountains in the world, together, the way they had always done everything. He told everyone to keep watching, because the next thing they would see would be 4 best friends on the summit of Annapurna. Underneath, he added that things had been hard lately, but that getting to the top together would fix all of it, the way the summit always did. The plan for the summit push was simple, and it was strict. From Camp 2, they had to cross the corridor up to Camp 3, and the only safe way to do it was to leave deep in the cold before dawn, while the ice overhead was still locked hard, and be all the way through and onto the safer ground above before the sun came around and started working on the seracs. You move through that corridor in the dark for one reason, because that is when it is least likely to kill you, and there is no clever way around the rule. But the group could not get itself together. The night before, they reached Camp 2 late and frayed and barely speaking, and in the black hours when they should have been moving, they were arguing instead. Nico wanted to go ahead at his own pace. Cyrone wanted to keep everyone tight and wait for Fern. Ananya would not take a side. The argument burned through the cold, safe hours they could not afford to lose, and by the time they finally started up into the corridor, the dark was gone, and the light was coming, and the one rule the mountain actually enforces had already been broken. The night before, from Camp 2, Nico sent one last short message out on the satellite device, the way he had from every stop on the mountain. He said the weather looked perfect, that the team was strong, that the hardest part was almost behind them, and that the next thing anyone would hear would come from higher up, with the worst of the climbing finally below them. It was the last message any of the four of them ever sent. You do not throw away your dark hours to a tent argument on Annapurna. Every guide alive knows that corridor gets crossed before the sun hits it, and these four bled those safe hours away over who was angry at who. They went into the corridor far too late, and almost at once the broken group did the most dangerous thing it could do. It came apart inside the trap. Nico pushed out front fast, the way he had the whole trip, climbing for the safer ground above at a pace the others could not match. Cyrone stayed back with Fern, who was already struggling, trying to keep the youngest and weakest of them moving through the chute. Ananya climbed somewhere in between, alone. Instead of one tight group crossing the danger together in the few minutes it was supposed to take, they were strung out up and down the corridor in a long, ragged line, each of them isolated, exactly the shape Tendi had feared since base camp. Tendi and Mingmar could not be in three places at once, and they split themselves as best they could, two Sherpas trying to herd a scattered group through the one place you never want to be slow. And the sun was climbing now, finding the ice above them, loosening what the cold of the night had been holding in place. The whole point of that corridor is to cross it together and fast while the ice is still locked hard, and these four were scattered up and down one at a time as the sun came out. That is where I think the mountain won. The crossing was slow and strung out and joyless. Four people who had come here as friends now picking through the most dangerous ground on the mountain nearly alone, each in their own small circle of fear. Inside that corridor, the only thing that keeps you alive is being quick, and they were anything but. Fern was spent and shaking. Cyrone could not get her to move faster. Nico was already far above and out of reach, and Ananya was somewhere in the middle of it all, exposed. The few others who had crossed at a sane hour were long gone, and the corridor belonged now to four people who should have been through it hours earlier. Tendi knew the math was already lost, that every extra minute in that chute as the sun worked the ice overhead was a minute closer to the thing he had spent his whole career trying to keep clients away from. When the man who has climbed this peak and buried friends in that exact chute is screaming at you to move, to get out from under the ice now, you move. They were too scattered and too spent by then to do anything fast. There was no clean moment where the group pulled itself together, because by then there was no group left to pull. Nico was far above, nearly at the safer ground, climbing for it alone. Cyrone and Fern were low in the chute, moving at the pace of the most exhausted of them. Ananya was in the middle, on her own. The thing that should have happened, the four of them and the two Sherpas moving through as one fast, tight unit and getting clear together, could not happen, because there was no longer any together. They were four separate people scattered the length of the killing ground in the warm, bright middle of the morning, every one of them under the same wall of ice at the exact hour it is most likely to let go. They were so fixed on getting through and bagging this climb that I do not think one of them did the simple math that crossing the killing ground this late put every single one of them under the ice at the exact hour it most wants to move. What happened next was the precise thing Tendi had feared since the first day at base camp. Scattered the length of the corridor, exhausted, hours too late. The four of them were still strung out under the Serex in the heat of the late morning, at the very hour the guides spend their whole careers teaching people to be nowhere near. The sun had been on the ice above for a while by then, working into it, loosening what the cold of the night had held in place. Tendi was driving them as hard as he could, trying to close the gaps and get them out, but you cannot pull a scattered group back together by willpower on ground like that, not when each of them is at the ragged end of everything they have. Somewhere up in that warming ice, after a long morning of sun on a wall already heavy with the season's snow, the mountain did the thing it has done to so many before them. A great slab of it let go above the corridor and came down the only path there was. The same path all four of them were strung out across, with nowhere to run and no time to try. There was no warning that meant anything, just a crack, and then the sound, and then the snow. Cyrone Yount, Ananya Vesna, Nico Ferreira, and Fern Quill never came down off Annapurna. They were caught in the corridor that morning, separated, each of them alone in the one place on the mountain where being alone is fatal. And the slide that came down took what a tight team might have been clear and 100 feet apart. The 4 friends who had come to the deadliest mountain on Earth to prove how unbreakable they were together died, scattered across it, no longer climbing as anything like a team, undone in the end, not by the altitude or the cold, but by the slow, quiet thing that had been pulling them apart since the trek in. Tendi and Mingmar were both caught at the edge of it, and both paid a price that never left. Mingmar was struck and buried to the chest, and by the time the others had dug him out and the weather let a helicopter in, the cold had done its work. The frostbite in his hands and feet so deep that the surgeons in Kathmandu could not save all of his fingers and toes, and the strong young climber who carried more than his share never roped up again. Tendi was thrown and slammed into the hard ice lower down, and the injury to his back was the kind that does not heal, the kind that left him walking with a cane in his 40s and unable to carry a load, let alone guide. The expedition company began the grim work that follows, notifying the liaison officer assigned to the climb, the district authorities below, and through the embassy, the 4 families back in Colorado still waiting for a photo from the summit. A helicopter flew the corridor when the weather allowed, and the Sherpas studied it from a safe distance, but the 4 had been buried where they fell, in a chute too loaded and dangerous to send anyone back into, and Annapurna did not give them back. What came down instead was the record of it, the bright, warm posts about 4 best friends and an unbreakable bond made by 4 people who, in the end, could not hold themselves together long enough to get off the mountain alive. Truthfully, what stays with me is the mountain barely had to do anything. They came to Annapurna to prove their friendship could survive anything and let it fall apart at the one moment their lives depended on it holding. Tendi had read it the first week, the way the Sherpas always do, because what they understand cannot be taught in a season, only earned in a lifetime of watching groups succeed and fail on hard ground. He had seen 4 friends slowly stop trusting each other, and he had known what that meant on a mountain like this, and he had still gone up and still fought for them, because that is what those men do. Cyrone and Ananya and Nico and Fern were not reckless people, and they were not bad climbers. Most of them. They simply forgot that on Annapurna the rope between you is not the only thing keeping you alive, that a team is only as strong as the trust running through it, and that the mountain does not wait for you to work out your differences. It does not care that you used to be the best of friends. It only asks whether you can hold together for the few minutes it takes to cross the worst of it, and the saddest answer 4 young people ever gave that mountain was no. If you liked today's episode, go ahead and hit that like button. You know you want to do it. And come on, subscribe. When you're watching and not subscribing, that's cold. I don't like that. You know what? Go away. Shoo. Bye-bye.